Thank you. Our speaker today is our Interim Director, Amy Miller. Most of you probably know her, but just in case you are a new visitor, here is a brief bio. Amy is a clinical social worker, writer, mediator, singer, coach, and counselor, among many other things. She has a master's degree from the Brown School of Social Work at Washington University and was in private practice as a therapist and coach for over a decade. She's also giving thought to where she's headed when she's done working for us, so if anyone has thoughts for her, she is taking your input. Please join me in welcoming Amy Miller.
I appreciate the ad, so I will be taking suggestions. But we've got time. And for my platform, we're going to do 25 minutes of silent meditation. Just kidding. I wouldn't do that to you. That minute takes so long. So I've been reflecting on silence lately. Literal silence is in a conversational pause or a quiet house, as well as how silence is used relationally. And then the broader idea of silence and what it represents or suggests. Silence as absence of explanation or absence of statement. So let's talk about all of that. Personally, I love silence. When my house is quiet, sometimes I don't even do anything, I just sort of sit there. And I very often drive in silence. I love music, but music needs my attention. And so it's either the main thing or I don't want it at all. And when I drive in silence, it's not actually quiet because my brain is traveling in all directions. It's like a spider web where one thing leads to another thing, which leads to another thing, and next thing you know, I've arrived somewhere and have no idea where I started, figuratively and sometimes literally. One time a friend asked me what I was doing when I drive in silence, and I said, well, I'm thinking. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, oh, I don't drive in silence. That's boring. She said, I listen to the radio. I was like, yeah, but like, what is your brain doing? She's like, nothing. That must be amazing. I don't think it's been silent inside my brain for more than 2 seconds in my entire life. I'm literally always thinking about something and multiple things and going down rabbit holes and processing what's happened and collecting information and sorting it. Much like Morgan, I see patterns. So I'm often putting things into patterns and rewriting people's files like, oh, that's a new thing about Trish. Oh, let me add it to her file. It goes along with these other things. So it makes sense that since there's a lot of noise internally, that I would desire silence externally. Because internally, it's a cacophony. But I think I'm onto something with the silent driving. A 2001 study defined a default mode of brain function that showed that even when the brain was resting, it was perpetually actively internalizing and evaluating information. Follow-up research found that the default mode is also used during the process of self-reflection. In 2013, in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, Joseph Moran and others wrote, the brain's default mode network is observed most closely during the psychological task of reflecting on one's personalities and characteristics, or self-reflection, rather than during self-recognition, thinking of the self-concept or thinking about self-esteem, for example. So when the brain rests, it is able to integrate internal and external information into a conscious workplace. When you are not distracted by noise or goal-oriented tasks, there appears to be a quiet time that allows your conscious workspace to process things. During these periods of silence, your brain has the freedom it needs to discover its place in your internal and external worlds. The default mode helps you think about profound things in an imaginative way. How many of you get inspired in the shower, right? Best ideas in the shower. I never actually remember them fully when I get out of the shower. I need like a recording device in there with me. But similarly, a 2013 study published in the Brain Structure and Function Journal involved comparing the effects of silence with varying types of noise and seeing the effects it had on the brains of mice. And I saw this study when I'm searching about the science of silence. This study was very popular. So they took mice, and a control group was kept in total silence, which they thought would just be the control group. But scientists found that after just 2 hours, the control group was the one that showed the most interesting results. New cell growth that developed into functioning neurons occurred in the hippocampus, the part of the brain connected to learning, memory, and emotion. So the suggestion is that spending time in silence is like watering the garden of your brain cells. It literally grows your brain. Alternately, studies that measure the impact of noise pollution have found that people, in particular children, exposed to constant noise actually develop a severe stress response. I lost my spot. A severe stress response with correlated cognitive impairment during the exposure. Learning ability is impacted. I saw another study that I didn't put in here specifically, but that talked about that schools that were located close to airports or trains, that there was a lot of noise, that kids did worse on performance. So regardless of age, those of us living in constantly noisy environments have continuously high levels of stress hormones. Silence allows our brain and body to let their guard down and replenish. Meditation practices can help silence the chatter in our minds with intention and mindfulness. Did you know we have a mindfulness meditation group that meets here every week? Sharon, is that you? Sharon Began, you can talk to her about it. My brain is close to silent during yoga class, which is a moving meditation. I've often joked that I have 2 conversational speeds: complete silence and tell me everything. And it's really true, I'm completely incapable of small talk. Someone I met recently joked with me within minutes. He was like, so maybe start with the weather and ease into genocide. I was like, but I can't though. Like I can't, there's no space in between, like I'm unable to do this. I would rather say nothing than waste my time on chit chat. I'm very bad at it and it irks my spirit. So when that is the expectation, I appear to be a very quiet person. If you take me to a networking event, they'll be like, she didn't say a word. Like, that's because you're boring. I know other folks have mixed feelings about silence as a conversational tool, including how and when to use it and how to interpret it. We all know people, or maybe we are those people, who just can't tolerate silence. Raise your hand if you struggle with allowing interpersonal silence. Come on. Like if you're in a group and no one says anything for a second, you feel like you have to jump in? None of you? Okay, thank you. At least a couple. Or you're sitting with a friend and they just stare off into space. You feel the urge to speak just to break the silence. I had a client for a long time who would take like a full 2 to 3 minutes to ponder everything I said. You know how long this mindfulness minute takes? Can you imagine? And there was a clock in my office, which I never noticed except with this client. And I would just have to sit there, tick, 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 for so long. And it used to drive me crazy. I had a really hard time with it, but I felt like I needed to fill the space and ask another question, but she was actually spending the time thinking about the previous question. So I had to just wait for her, to allow the space to exist, for her to take the time she needed to arrive at the thing she wanted to say. So here are some reflection questions for you. Is silence mostly a good or bad thing in your life? What is your relationship to silence? What does it mean when you are silent? Do you inform the people you're in relationship with how to interpret your silence? So when I'm silent with my family of origin, which is most of the time, that means I've learned that talking doesn't yield desirable results, so I'm better off not speaking. I'm not angry. It's just that the silences are not even uncomfortable, but they do mean something. I'm not sure how they're interpreted by my family of origin, but to me, my silence means I've kind of given up on being able to share my life in any great detail because it is unsatisfying. It's like a networking event. Like, so, how about this weather? But when I'm silent with my partner, it simply means that we're comfortable together, and I don't always have to be talking to feel connected to him. But for some couples, silence is actually stonewalling, an interpersonal dynamic that the Gottman Institute labels one of the harbingers of pending divorce. Sometimes in relationships, people will go many years without talking about whatever the elephants in the room of the relationship are. It's amazing what happens in marriage and relationship coaching when people really start to communicate. Breaking the silence around sexual issues, lack of equity in the distribution of domestic labor, or finally asking for something you really want or need but were afraid to say. And I'm reminded of this Fred Rogers quote that I used in my book. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can become more manageable. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. The people we trust with that important talk can help us know that we are not alone. Being silent about the things that hurt or bother you in your relationships virtually ensures that they will continue, because no one can know what you don't express. And yet, how many men identify as the strong and silent type? You don't have to raise your hand. I'm sure it's some of you. There historically has been a theme of men just keeping everything inside, and we've enabled and even encouraged this silent providership role for men, much to their detriment and ours. We also had a whole silent generation, of which some of you are members. It was folks born between the mid-1920s and the mid-1940s. And I did all this research about the silent generation, and like the overarching theme, the stereotype that comes up the most about the silent generation is that they just sort of quietly endured. But also, giving someone the silent treatment is a punishment. It's a passive-aggressive way of expressing displeasure by ignoring and withdrawing communication. Our silences mean things. Sometimes the absence of communication is communication. Then again, I'll admit that sometimes I should be silent and I'm not. Sometimes I speak too soon and I'm not well informed enough. Have you ever spoken when you would have been better served to stay silent? You don't have to raise your hand on that either. Have you ever really put your foot in your mouth when you should have just shut up? It reminds me of the quote, which was attributed to many people, but it seems people now agree that Maurice Switzer is who actually said this. Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. So many times I have misspoken and wished I had just not said anything. But you can't unring a bell, as they say. You just have to fix it the best you can once you say the wrong thing. But conversely, have you ever been silent when you know you should have spoken up? What got in your way? I know I have. Especially since having Zoe, my daughter, who, if you guys don't, anyone who doesn't know me, my daughter is biracial, my husband's black. And many times I found myself frozen in the face of a microaggression or even an overtly racist statement because my emotions take the lead and I get flooded. Prior to having a black child, I was able to see racism as an abstraction to some extent, a problem to be solved. But because it's now so very personal, I can't take enough steps back to be able to be educational or even rational. So if you wonder why I'm not doing anti-racist work at the moment, that is why. I think that has probably happened to all of us at various times, on various topics or about issues that really mean something to us. Our differing identities and the degree to which we may have suffered as a result of those identities can certainly inform how we respond to perceived offenses. Part of effective allyship is positioning ourselves to be the ones to say the hard things from a step away, to be able to abstract the problem and stay rational. It's easy for me to be a rabid advocate of gender-expansive care, for example, because neither I nor my child are gender-expansive and in need of medical care so far. But if I have a trans child, my instinct to protect my child immediately transforms into a different degree of intensity, and at least for me personally, might actually make me less effective because I'm so emotionally invested. Sometimes we are silent because we don't want to have conflict, or because we don't know what to say, or because we believe our voice doesn't matter, or because it isn't safe to say what we think or express who we are. Sometimes silence is a necessary and life-saving strategy. Sometimes silence is a way of showing respect by not disagreeing with someone. Many of us have had those offensive elders at the holiday dinner table that we have to either ignore or deal with the fallout of speaking up. Silence has been a big topic these past years as an increasingly divisive political environment has emerged. When is it right to stay silent, and when are you tacitly agreeing through your silence? It's a constant calculation of costs and benefits. And you've heard the phrase, silence is compliance. It's often the case that by not saying anything when someone says or does something harmful, whether that be merely unkind, or whether it is misogynistic, racist, homophobic, transphobic, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, xenophobic, etc. If you are silent, then the people around you might assume you don't disagree. Does it matter? I think it does. If we value holding ourselves in integrity, then not speaking up when we know we should is not aligned. I personally think that whatever our identities are, it never serves any of us to stay silent when anyone is being harmed, oppressed, bullied, restricted. Being a voice for kindness and peace and fairness is aligned with our values as humanists. I know we also deeply value folks' individual right to think and often say whatever they want, and we are not in the business of policing others' behavior. But that value might sometimes be in direct conflict with the value of affirming the dignity and worth of all human beings. Sometimes people being harmful in their expression of their right to question or their right to think and say what they want. Sometimes people are being harmful in their expression of their right to question or their right to think and say what they want. The Ethical Society of St. Louis has community agreements for the first time in an attempt to bring everyone together in the shared spirit of being kind and constructive in our communication. Most people behave with kindness naturally and need not be reminded. But when folks do not, remaining silent is not the path to community wellness and emotional safety for our members. So we can't be afraid to speak up. Similarly, being afraid to ask questions doesn't help us grow. I found myself lately afraid of asking the wrong questions and offending people I care about. It's been a strange position because I'm usually not worried about this. I'm generally careful in curating my opinions, checking and rechecking with facts and evidence. When I speak on something, I'm generally clear on my moral and ethical positions and figure anyone offended, it's their problem. I'm not saying this is a desirable quality, but generally speaking, I'm intentional in my communication, and so I'm not concerned about being offensive, as offending the racists and homophobes of the world doesn't bother me. But lately, I've been finding myself concerned with causing offense to people I care about, and it's pushing up against a moral clarity that I've found, and I'm finding it very confusing. Some of you may be having a similar experience. I have been staying silent more often than usual, even when I feel compelled to speak. And I've been judged when I do speak up by people I would have previously assumed agreed with me. I know some of you worry about asking the wrong questions about race, about gender, about sexuality. For what it's worth, you can ask me your questions. When asked in good faith and the spirit of curiosity and a desire to learn, I hope you will. Someone asked me recently about my pronouns, which are she or they. And this person asked very carefully so as not to cause offense. But I wasn't offended. It might not make sense. You might need an answer. I'd rather you ask me than the internet. I'm happy to explain, so please ask. Silence is not how we grow. So if I'm being very transparent, I've been afraid of being called anti-Semitic lately for asking questions about what's happening in Israel and Palestine. I've been reading and watching and studying the history of the conflict for the past several months, and I've seen many high-profile people lose their jobs and be doxxed and threatened for asking questions or pointing out issues or demanding an end to violence. The immediate conflation of criticism of a government with an offense like anti-Semitism has silenced many people who otherwise might be speaking and asking questions and learning. It's been a very strange and divisive time. Political alliances that usually go without saying are fractured along previously unpredictable lines. And I've been afraid to say anything about almost any hot or potentially divisive topic from my leadership position out of fear of being accused of speaking for the Ethical Society. I know previous leaders have created varying degrees of controversy by making statements from this very podium and on your behalf. As an interim, I'm in a particularly strange position because I'm still an outsider insofar as I'm not a long-time ethical culture person, and I won't be here long enough to be responsible for any long-term consequences of any controversy I may inspire. We have been, as a community, dancing around talking about current events. We've remained silent publicly in part because we haven't been wrestling with it internally. So there's no way to measure the places we are aligned or not. I know many of us have been silent because we are afraid to upset or offend our friends and community members who we love. I have recently had very productive conversations with some of our members, and it's been really nice. If you didn't know already, though, I will tell you, the Ethical Society, by and large, does not take official positions on things happening in the world. And I think a lot of people don't know this. It's a well-documented aspect of your history that part of being a society of free thinkers is that there is rarely consensus enough to declare any public unified stance. And so if you were to take an official position, there is a convoluted process by which you arrive at one, and it's in the policy manual if anyone is interested. It seems like we've made a de facto exception with abortion rights. We have been at the forefront of championing reproductive freedom, and I love that. We raised a lot of money last week in this very room for the Missouri Abortion Fund, and thank you to many of you who were here. And we've collected many signatures for the ballot initiative. But there are other things going on in the world, here in the US and elsewhere, and regardless of any official position from the membership, I've come to believe that silence is not the solution. I've been asked many times from within and outside of our organization if we are getting involved in demands for a ceasefire in Palestine. And it has honestly felt like a landmine. It feels very vulnerable even to say this from here. But our silence so far has represented avoidance more than lack of consensus. It certainly does not represent compliance or agreement with anything that's happening. We haven't really discussed it to see whether we can find agreement. I don't blame anyone for this. I'm complicit, and I have not been brave about this. I've been mostly silent because I don't want to upset anyone or be the recipient of criticism. I'm not silent in my personal life at all, ever, and I know I've offended some of you when you've accessed my personal social media. I do value being at a place where at least I don't worry about losing my job for taking a stand personally. But we're all coming at understanding from different perspectives, and we all hold different pieces of knowledge and understanding that will benefit the group across the board of any potentially controversial or difficult to discuss topics. Not just this one, but many others as well. And as with anything else, each of our identities is complex and intersectional. But if there are any people that I would trust to be able to handle big, hard conversations, it should be a group of free thinkers like us. I think we can tackle anything if we hold the dignity and worth of one another at the forefront of our minds. Personally, I do not want my legacy to be we avoided hard things because we were afraid to offend. I want it to be we worked really hard to communicate and manage disagreement and conflicts in a kind and respectful way. We are here together because we want to be in community. We are here together because we want to make the world a better place, because we hope to learn better ways to be human together. None of us is free from the influence of our culture. None of us are free of unconscious bias, or missing context, or lack of knowledge. Each of us can learn from each other. It is a core value of ours. We can learn from everyone, but we cannot do that in silence. And to quote Harvey Milk, hope will never be silent. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. You gave us a lot to think about and talk about, and I appreciate that. The Welcome team will now take up a collection to support the Society. We rely on the generosity of members and friends to ensure that we can keep providing our many free programs. If you don't have cash with you today, you can donate at ethicalstl.org/donate or use, the QR code on the screen. If you are interested in joining the Ethical Society and becoming a pledging member, or you are a new visitor and would like to know more about the Society, Membership Coordinator Courtney Scott Camarada is not here today. So, save your questions. No, I'm just kidding. But members will be available afterwards downstairs to answer your questions at the Visitor Connect table. As well, the second Sunday of each month is Visitor Sunday, where you are welcome to join Amy and other staff members for donuts and to ask questions. Donuts is what gets people there, right? The next one is April 14th. Okay, now I have some announcements. Here we go. A message from the Climate Action Now team. When it comes to combating climate change, the lentil may be the perfect legume. They are also delicious. This announcement made me giggle when I read it. Okay, that being the case, please join us for the first Sunday lunch at noon next Sunday, April 7th, when we will be serving vegetarian or vegan fare featuring this all-important legume, the lentil. The menu includes lentils mexicanos served with tortilla chips, a tossed salad, and a drink. Dessert will include a homemade chocolate chip cookie or a piece of fruit, plus a bonus scoop of ice cream until supplies run out. Peanut butter and jelly or cheese sandwiches will be available for kids or adults who prefer something more familiar. That's what it says. The cost is $10 for adults and $5 for kids. Come and enjoy a meal with friends and maybe learn more about the Climate Action Now team's programs and suggested actions individuals can take to address the problems of climate change. And then Stephanie Segala would like to come make an announcement. Let's welcome her, shall we?
Well, it's a wonderful world out there. We've heard that musically. We've heard it from Nikki. And I'm offering you an opportunity to get outside and do something fun and good. This is an opportunity to participate in No Weeds 2024. No Weeds 2024 is a campaign to help the building look really good all year round. As many of you know, we do have a landscaping team, a landscaper who comes and mows, and he just put some nice brown mulch out there this week. But all the rest of it is up to us. And for the past couple of years, nothing has been done, and the building has really looked like an abandoned lot by the time you get to about mid-July. So I'd like to start a couple of weeding and maintenance teams. One would meet during the week, one might meet on a weekend on a rotating basis. There'll be tools, there'll be knowledgeable supervision from somebody who knows what a weed looks like if maybe you don't. So I got a clipboard. Look for me after platform. I really need to have some help with this. It's a little bit much for just a few people, but it can be fun, and maybe there could even be donuts. So talk to me later.
Thank you, Stephanie. Part of our responsibility as a community is in caring for our building as well, so I appreciate you taking the initiative on that. We would love to keep you informed about future events at the Ethical Society of St. Louis. You can use that QR code to sign up for the weekly newsletter, check the Friends of the Ethical Society Facebook page, or email your relevant staff person. All of those email addresses should be found on the back side of your program today. This is a vibrant place, and I hope that you will get involved and connected into the community in ways that feel good to you. Okay, it's now time for our third musical selection. Tommy is coming back to the stage to perform an original song called You Don't Have to Dance. So you can cry, but you don't have to dance.
So when my kids were little, we went down to my little brother's wedding in New Orleans, and we were watching the workmen set up the dance floor, and my daughter was, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 at the time, and she looked at me when she sort of realized what was happening, and she was horrified, and she was like, "Dad, do we have to dance?" And I was like, oh, I laughed. I said, "No, child, you do not have to dance." They did, of course, dance all night long, and it was great. But I thought there's so many things you don't have to do. And I thought I should write a song for my kids about things they don't have to do. So that's what this is. You don't have to smile, don't have to laugh at jokes that aren't funny, just to be nice. You don't have to make a chit-chat or remember people's names. And you don't have to dance. You can be late, and you can leave early. You can skip it if you'd just rather not. You don't have to shake hands or keep up appearances. And you don't have to dance. You can't sleep in your clothes, eat with your fingers crisscross, applesauce on the floor. And if anyone's too good, you just show them the exit. 'Cause you don't have to rhyme, you don't have to match your shoes to your coat or your fish to your wine. You don't have to agree to disagree, and you don't have to dance. You can't sleep in your clothes, eat with your fingers crisscross, applesauce on the floor. And if anyone's too good, you just show them the exit. 'Cause you don't have to rhyme, you don't have to match your shoes to your coat or your fish to your wine. You don't have to agree to disagree, and you don't have to dance. You don't have to agree to disagree, and you don't have to dance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed that so much. I love you don't have to agree to disagree. It's the best. Okay. Thank you for being here today, for each other and for yourselves. I hope today's platform helped you feel more connected to one another and motivated you to implement the core values more in your day-to-day life. I invite you to spend more time in community today, greet someone nearby, head downstairs to the Becker Room for coffee, tea, and conversation. And if you don't know where that is, just follow the crowd that direction and down. Thank you for being here. I hope you have a wonderful week, a wonderful first week of April, and that we will see you back here next week for more community.